Good Friday to everybody. How you doing? There's Victor.
Good.
It's Friday again.
Friday. Only 3 days until Monday.
That's correct. Well, 2 days if you don't want to count today. By the way, if you haven't been around with us before, my name is Darren Pope. This is Victor Farsick over here to your right, my left. Wait, are you to my left? Yeah, you are. It's
We're
whatever.
somewhere.
So anyway, we're the co-host of a podcast called DevOps Paradox, and on Fridays we do DevOps Paradox Live. If you've been with us in the past, you might notice that we're a little bit earlier than normal. My schedule has changed just a little bit, so for the time being, we can't go back 2 hours from now. I wish we could, but hey, life goes on. And we're still here. And the podcast... Oh, wait, you've got your drink. What did you have? I just saw you lift up something.
Water. I'm boring lately. Yeah, it's so...
Yeah, okay, well, here I am. Cheers. But wait, what is up, Klaus? I had to go to the grocery store last night. And I'm a sucker for... Easter was what, 2 weeks? Yes, 2 weeks ago, roughly? I've lost count now. Maybe 2 weeks.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and they had white chocolate bark at 30% off.
And Lidl,
yeah. So, and here is said piece. Let's see if it focuses there. Right? That's like, it's probably not going to focus because it sees my face. But, so this is what I'm going to be munching on today. It's okay. I can tell it's been 2 weeks after Easter. Let's just put it that way. It's not the freshest of candies.
chocolate doesn't go bad, right?
It doesn't go bad in only 2 weeks, no. But I'm not a big white chocolate fan, but any kind of chocolate is better than no chocolate at all. Most days. So the podcast that came out this week, which was episode 104, I'm trying to find all my notes here. Technical debt is a business decision. We had Dan on from, almost said the different, Testify. Dan Burns from Testify.
Oh, yeah.
It's because we time shift everything that we do, it's hard to keep track what's true, much less. It's just
usually when you're announcing a podcast, I pretend as if I know what it's about until you say it.
Yeah. I think this one was pretty close. I think we recorded this one less than 10 days ago. So it's still pretty fresh. Fortunately, we're getting a little bit ahead right now. Getting ready for summertime. So Victor can go on his typical 6-month European vacation. Right? That's what you guys do over there, right? Basically, You take off from May until November. And then you take off.
Yeah, we have only one paid month vacation.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the 5 months of vacation, we're pretending to be working.
Let's not get into it today. But we were talking about technical debt. That's the reason why the title came out the way it did. We didn't necessarily call that out from the title, but I came up with that. And there was also a point in there where I blamed Agile for causing all the technical debt that exists. And I remember when we were recording that, your eyes got big as saucers. That I went there.
It is Agile's fault for a simple reason, because since a couple of years ago, every single team in every single company is Agile. No matter what they're doing, doesn't matter what you're doing, you're calling yourself Agile, which is completely unrelated with how you're working, right? So if everybody is Agile today, then all the technical debt, at least those accumulated in the last couple of years, is Agile's fault.
Yeah. If you haven't listened to it,
Agile promised to... you jumped into Agile on the promise that Agile is going to fix everything. So that means that if you have technical debt from before Agile and you didn't fix it yet, it's also Agile's fault.
We probably should do a deeper dive on that. But not today. Not today. Actually, today is sort of weird. This is beginning to feel again like right before, what was the big conference to where everything just went dark for a few weeks? Like there was no news anywhere. That's what this feels like. Was that KubeCon in November?
Yeah, it was KubeCon, exactly. It's twice a year that a month before KubeCon, nobody announces anything.
Yeah.
Because they're waiting for KubeCon.
Yeah. But there was at least a little bit of Docker news this week. Dockershim came out. The news about Dockershim came out. When was that? I don't even remember that
Maybe
either.
2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like
It's
that.
probably longer than that because I
Or
remember
longer,
we
yeah.
talked about it. Yeah, but now Mirantis is saying there is a future for Dockershim and it's called cri-dockerd or cri-dockerd, not cryo. I listened to Brett's show yesterday, Brett Fisher's show, and he talked. He touched on this just a little bit, and his reasoning was, okay, if you're using Docker to build your images instead of the other tooling, Jib, Canico, Builda, whatever you want to use, he says it sort of makes sense. Now, I don't know Brett. You know Brett much better than I do. In fact, as we get to one of the videos this week, he actually called out one of your videos from this week. But I don't know that I agree with him. I can't think of any good reason why Docker, and especially Dockershim, should exist within a Kubernetes cluster. Is there one? Am I just missing something?
There is a reason. I'll get to it in a moment. But first, let me comment on what you said that Brett said. All those cases where you're, let's say, building locally and what's not, you're not using Kubernetes for that. So it's not a reason, right? When you're building locally, you're building it directly in Docker, skipping completely Kubernetes, or using Docker that runs Kubernetes, but still bypassing Kubernetes when you are building stuff. So that reason doesn't make sense to me. The reason that does make sense is that there is still a certain number, and that number is unknown to me, but it cannot be high, of Docker Enterprise users. Basically, Mirantis bought Docker Enterprise.
Right.
And they have some number of users using Docker Swarm or Kubernetes mixed with Docker or Docker Enterprise, which is, anyways, there is a certain number of users of Docker Enterprise. And they need this.
Yeah. But is that a valid reason?
I mean, for Mirantis it is. For everybody else in the world, it isn't. Right.
So how are you going to convince people of that? Because, I mean, a lot of people will just say, I don't really care. But then you're going to have some people, it's like, oh, we have to have Docker running inside of Kubernetes.
You cannot have Docker inside Kubernetes unless you're building your own distribution of Docker, right? I mean,
And that was one of the points that Brett called out. It's like, this only really matters to people building distributions.
Exactly. And I cannot imagine a good reason why you would build your own distribution unless you are planning to sell it or open source it or something like that. But for your internal usage, I cannot imagine why would we still build our own distributions. Yeah. I mean, there might be a certain number of users with very specific needs, but it's the same thing like how many companies build their own Linux kernel. I'm not saying that nobody's building it, but that percentage must be extremely low.
Very, very
because
small.
there is no need for it.
Yeah, and that was one more thing, since we're still sort of on the Brett subject. One other thing he called out yesterday is it's like if you're needing to run your own distribution or you're needing to self-manage your own distribution, he says Rancher is the answer, or maybe OpenShift. And he called out, it's like he's not a Red Hat person, so he typically sees Rancher. But he did call out that don't do vanilla Kubernetes. And I've seen people do vanilla Kubernetes. And Rancher has been available, but they think, oh no, we want to be, the gold copy. It's like, I don't think you really do. I don't think you understand what kind of debt that you're taking on by doing that.
In most cases, I believe it's simply because you can. So you can create your own Kubernetes distribution, therefore you should. And it's the other way around. You can, Therefore, you shouldn't, because others can do it and you can just take the work from others. It's the same message over and over again. Focus on your business, what you need to make your business successful. And 99.9% of people do not need to build their own Kubernetes distribution to make their business successful. It's only a distraction from being successful.
I agree with that. So if you are one of the few that are running Docker Enterprise, know that Mirantis has your back. That's a good thing, right? They are doing the right thing for their clients.
It's not. I must. Sorry for
Go ahead.
Injecting myself into conversation, but it's not a good thing. It's postponing the inevitable. I can bet my career or anything you want that this will not be long lasting, something that will take you into next century or whatever, right? This is just postponing their clients leaving the platform because that platform is tied to something that doesn't exist anymore. Or sorry, it exists, but it shouldn't exist. It is tricking their customers, postponing their decisions. That's what it is. I'm sorry, Mirantis, I'm negative, but that's how I see it.
So I want to call out sort of a parallel that's happening over in the Java world, is that support for TLS 1.0 and 1.1 is being dropped in the next release in OpenJDK and in every distribution except for Corretto, which is AWS's bake of OpenJDK. And they're hanging on to it just a little bit longer because clients have said, hey, look, we still need this for a little bit longer. Well, it's free though, right? But it is money.
It is tied to other IBM offerings and what's not. And I'm not going to enter now in business decisions, but IBM JDK should have disappeared like 10 years ago or 20. It stopped making sense long time ago.
Yeah. Did I say IBM? If I did, I meant AWS.
Okay,
AWS.
You said maybe I misunderstood. I thought you said the IBM. Okay, so you're talking about more recent things.
Like Corretto, which is their bake of OpenJDK, they're going to keep TLS 1.0 and 1.1 in for now, just a little bit longer, because they said they have clients. Now, the question is, if you are, as a business application developer, if you're still using TLS 1.0 and 1.1, which have been known to be garbage for a while, and 1.2 has been available to you, your response to me would be, well, product has said that doesn't matter. It keeps on getting kicked down the road. Well, guess what? You're at the end of the road, in my opinion. You have to make these changes, and I think that's the parallel to this Dockershim change. They're kicking the can down the road, but eventually it's like, why bother? So,
exactly.
Okay, let's move on from that. Here's an item that I saw today. We typically, we talk about the cloud vendors a lot, and this site is. And by the way, the links to everything that we've had here today will be down in the show notes at some point today, later. But this site is called Cloud Wars, cloudwars.co. And Microsoft versus Amazon. Now, I haven't followed the numbers a whole lot. I assumed AWS was always number one. I assumed. But again, I don't follow the numbers that close. You expect earning releases for both Microsoft and Amazon next week. Ballpark. Based on what this, who wrote this? Bob Evans. So the way that Bob wrote this, I'm expecting Microsoft to report, and this is a key part here, commercial cloud revenue, which means not gov cloud revenue, is the way I read that. I'm assuming that's what that means. But Microsoft to report commercial cloud revenue between 17.5 and 18 billion. Let's just call it 18 billion to keep the numbers square. For the quarter or the months ending March 31st. Amazon is expected to crack 13 billion. So they're 5-ish billion behind Microsoft. Now, these numbers are interesting. That's $30 billion. But there's one small sentence at the very end of this article. After all, as no less an authority than Andy Jassy himself, Andy is now, wait, has he already become Amazon's president? Has Bezos stepped down yet?
He is, or he will be soon.
Close enough, but
Yeah.
at least said the cloud currently accounts for less than 5% of total global IT spend. Less than 5%. So that means greater than 95% of all global IT spend is still going to the data center. Some people don't want to believe that, right?
Yeah. And the trick is not, when we say data center, we usually mean servers running our applications. And it's much more than that. And that's the strength of Microsoft, I think, because it's not only our applications and Kubernetes clusters and what's not, it's Active Directories of the world and Office 365 and stuff like that, right? So there is much more than what developers perceive as being cloud. And that's the strength that Azure has compared to AWS. So if you take cloud as typical data center image, then AWS almost certainly has the edge. I'm sure of that. But if you include all the rest of what cloud is or could be, then Azure is in a very good position.
So Microsoft, Amazon, sorry, I'm eating my chocolate. I'm hungry. But then if you look in the bottom of this, and of course I'm assuming recommended reading would change over time, he has another article that we won't go into that has Oracle climbed into the number 3 spot. It was an interesting read. And it also talks about IBM Cloud. This is a very interesting site. Again, let's wait and see what earnings results are next week. That should be fun. Maybe we can talk about that some next week. Would that be next week? Let's see. Yeah, the 30th will be next Friday. Okay. Next up, I love the image, right? That's Indiana Jones, right? Image swapper. Mirror images into your own registry and swap the image. Okay, the mirror part is like, who cares? But swap the images references automatically. That's the cool part of this. Oh, nothing to say about that?
No, I mean, it's cool. I know that this project was not done by somebody who is in early 20s.
I would assume not, yeah. Let's assume that
by the image of Indiana Jones. That's already ancient history that young people probably don't know who Indiana Jones is anymore.
That's probably true. But Enrico Stan, he is from Sydney and committed to this repository last week. And he does not look to be in his 20s. Sorry, Enrico, if you are.
He knows Indiana Jones. He cannot be early 20s.
Yeah. Not early 20s. Maybe late 20s. It's possible.
That's
because
possible.
my daughter's 28, so she understands Indiana Jones, but she was also raised in a household that we taught the canon of Star Trek and Star Wars. So
there you go.
Anything that was Spielberg or Lucas was in our house. I just thought it was interesting because, again, obviously protecting against registry or external registry failures or pull limiting, any of these other things. The accidental image changes or removal of images, thinking back to, what was it, LeftPad, when they pulled that out of the NPM registry years ago.
Yep.
And then the internet died. Same type of deal. And the bigger thing, too, is reduce NAT ingress traffic costs, right? That's money. So, and then...
ultimately, every serious company wants to keep images in their own registry.
Yes. Or should.
For many reasons. Security, scanning, this and that, many different reasons. But none of those companies should go into the hustle of, typically how enterprise works. Hey, open a Jira ticket and I will evaluate this image from Docker Hub or wherever it is and scan it. And then eventually, maybe one day, if you're very lucky, put it in the registry so that you can use it. So having that mechanism is really helpful.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I haven't tried it out yet, of course, just like anything else Kubernetes. I'm still...
You're faking it, huh?
I am faking it. I'll call it out. You can call me out and I'll agree to it. I do want to call out one thing, though. I don't have... Where is it? Oh, it wasn't that one. It was Linode status. I want to pull this up real quick. I got to pull it up from a different screen here. I forgot about this. So since we're talking Kubernetes and me being a complete poser, so Linode is doing maintenance on their LKE thing on the 24th. It's in Toronto, okay, whatever. To make improvements to network infrastructure, the maintenance will result in a brief loss of connectivity to the control planes in Toronto, which we expect to last no more than 5 minutes, which is cool, right? Most workloads already running in the cluster will not be impacted by this maintenance. Now, I'm not throwing Linode under the bus here by any stretch of the imagination. My question is that last sentence true?
It might not be, and then
they're protecting themselves by saying most workloads, right? I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt.
I'm guessing and hoping that if I had to write that message and I work in a marketing department or legal department of a company, I would write the same thing. If I expect that there will be no downtime of the workloads, I would still write that just in case.
Right.
I hope that that's the case. Now, if the case is the opposite, that we are being more optimistic than reality, then shame on you. If it's just to cover yourself, then that's okay, I guess.
Yeah. But anyway, if you're running on LKE in Toronto and you weren't aware of this, number one, subscribe to their feed so you can be notified in the future. But was this the one that when you did the upgrade, everything went offline? Or was that DigitalOcean? I don't remember.
That was the one. That's the one. Don't upgrade your clusters in Linux. Just let them run forever.
Well, that was true as of the time whenever we did that. That may have changed, right?
They promised that no downtime upgrade will be possible through UI.
Oh, okay.
And at some later date, maybe through Terraform or through their API. And Terraform, right, is a reflection of the API.
Yep. Okay. I can't remember if it was them or if it was DigitalOcean.
It was them, yeah.
Okay. Shipa. What is the Shipa thing?
It's a platform on top of Kubernetes. The primary goal is really to simplify the process of deploying applications for everybody who is not Kubernetes ninja, right? And the general gist, and I think that's now outside of the conversation of Shipa, I think that's the next step for Kubernetes, that we all need to start treating our applications and not as Kubernetes resources. That's the same message I gave for kubevela for Shipa as I did for kubevela, and there are quite a few other projects there. We need to start thinking, how can I describe this as an application? And then Kubernetes resources, that's not my problem. That should be Kubernetes problem or Kubernetes controller's problem or somebody else's problem. And that's where Shipa is trying to go, I think.
And in full disclosure,
I work there.
You work at Shipa.
Yes, so that's why I'm trying to be more shorter than I usually do. I can speak about things for a long time, but I'm trying to be brief because I work there. So I don't want to give people impression that I'm doing marketing for Shipa. I am, but not in my channel. Let's put it that way.
Right. So let's move on to your very pink thumbnail, DevOps Tools for 2021. Again, disclosure, Victor sent me this one and another one. I went, go with the pink, just because. It was more loud. So
yeah. So
and this is the video that Brett called out yesterday on his stream. So Brett, thank you for calling out Victor's video. That gave it. This is hey, you're almost at 3,000.
Yeah,
views.
I mean,
That's
for
good.
my tiny channel, that's great. It's not huge. It's not great, really, but for the tiny channel I have, it's pretty good.
And you're getting close to 4,000 on this one.
Yeah.
Getting close.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
4,000. That will be by the time we finish this. By the time we finish today, the day, yeah.
Oh, by the way, our DevOps Paradox channel crossed 500 last week.
Yeah.
So we did that too.
And without any marketing. I mean, I think
Zero.
that's the thing. The reason why those two channels are not as massive as they could be is that we're not marketing people. We don't do marketing, right?
No.
They just exist, and some people enjoy them, right?
Yep. And for everybody that does enjoy them, thank you for watching our channels. We don't take that lightly. And hopefully you get some good information, you laugh a little bit, and whatever else the third item would be. You always have to do things in threes though, right? Doesn't matter. Okay. Well, you did. Tools, frameworks, and platforms. I'll pull it back that way. So what were some of the tools that you said we need to use?
Many. I mean, this was extremely difficult. This was a relatively easy video to make and extremely difficult video to prepare for. This is something that a person or even a whole team cannot do more than once, simply because, I don't remember, maybe there are 15, 20, no, more, 20, 25 tools I selected. And to select 25 tools, you need to go through at least 5 times more than that or 10 times more than that, right? So people will not see anything like that anytime soon.
So do you have your notes from when you did this? I didn't write down your recommendations.
Yeah, I have the notes somewhere, probably.
Okay, I can remember some of these. IDE was Visual Studio Code.
Yes, to me that's if you have the categories, I probably remember. Yeah. For IDE, to me, kind of, I don't know. There is no real discussion. It's VS Code. All respect to your subscription to JetBrains and all this stuff, but it's realistically really everything else is niche. Let's say.
Yeah, I still use VS Code and I use IntelliJ. I do use both. Because sometimes it is a little bit, depending on what the kind of thing is that I'm working on, VS Code doesn't have as good a support as IntelliJ does. So
yeah, could be.
But that number has gotten smaller over the past year. Here, let's randomly pick something else out here. Serverless.
Whomever is watching our show knows that I'm, probably you as well, kind of huge fan of Google Cloud Run.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a clear winner. Now, unless you want functions, functions as a service, flavor of serverless. And I'm trying to make that clear. Serverless is not functions as a service. Functions as a service is a subset of serverless. Then AWS is really ruling that area. The Lambda is really amazingly good.
Let's pick another one. Let's go here. Programming.
Oh, no. Why did you pick that one? That's the most controversial one, really. I called out JavaScript as ruling. Kind of, there is no alternative to JavaScript for front end, and and that did not end up well in comments and private messages I'm getting. And then I called out Go as something you should do, even if you shouldn't do it in your company, you should do it for your career, I think. And that was also many people threw stones at me, mostly because of programming. And I admit I shouldn't have put that there simply because programming is such a huge subject, such a massive one that, selecting one or two and explaining the reasons in half a minute was not a good idea.
Okay. I do want to ask a question about that. Why do you say Go in your personal time if it's not part of the day job? Why is Go to you that important? I mean, number one, some people think Go is still a new language. It's over 10 years old, right?
Yeah,
it's not a new language by any stretch of the imagination.
And it's almost everywhere except in big enterprises. So what that really means is the percentage of Go lines of code written in, let's say, last year is much smaller than most of the other languages. I don't think it expanded into enterprises, really. I mean, there are pockets in every enterprise working with Go, but it's not the main thing. But that's mostly because enterprises do not change what they do frequently, and especially with languages, right? You're not going to rewrite Java to Go now, just as you did not rewrite mainframe COBOL to Java. It's going to stay there forever. But I tend to look at things, there are two aspects. What is the most commonly used? And that's always a lot behind, always, because most commonly used means big enterprises, huge workloads, and Kubernetes is not the most commonly used target for deploying stuff either. But if you look at it from the perspective of the future, where are we going? Then Go is a pretty good candidate, because wherever I turn around, whenever I look at a project where people had the ability to choose what they're going to work in without thinking much about legacy, starting from scratch, it's JavaScript of some forms or Go. That's the most two commonly used things. Kind of, if you would go now and list all the which we're not going to do, analysis of all the open source projects started in the last 365 days, I bet that it would be those two.
You think?
Now there is also, I'm sure of that, yes. Now there is a lot of Python. You should most likely do Python if you're into machine learning. And of course, there are so many use cases that calling out to is not a good idea, right? I recognize that. But Go is something that almost every programmer should have on its curriculum. At least unless you're focused only on front end.
Right. I think one of the strong points for Go is multi-platform. Right? If I need to write a CLI, I'm going to use Go and I'm going to pull in Cobra to do that. That's the standard for any CLI written in Go, right?
Oh yeah. If you want, yeah. I mean, you can make self-executable jar.
Yeah.
That will run in every platform.
That's true.
It's not you cannot. It's just that it's really you want something that is not JVM for CLI for sure.
Right. But let's play out your thinking ahead. If everything is a container, if everything is an image that gets turned into a container, why does the language matter?
It depends, kind of. Let's say that if I go to extreme and I'm now entering into territory of something that I'm not working with myself for a long, long time, if you're running it in a container, then you might not want to do .NET because it's very heavy. You can, it depends really how you turn the argument. You can say, hey, if almost anything can run in a container, then anything is good as anything else. And there is truth in that. That's a big advantage of containers. But you can also say, hey, if you're not bound to a specific operating system, then why would we choose this over that? Like, if I'm not running it in Windows anymore, then .NET might still be a great choice, but I'm not limited by operating system when making that choice. I'm not sure whether that makes sense, right?
Right. Well, it does make sense. I'm still trying to think of, the only thing I can think is if a container is slow to start. In other words, is it due to the crappy way you wrote your application, or is it due to the actual language you chose to write your application in?
Both. Yeah. Right, it's a combination of both. You cannot avoid crappy programming. That's always a valid argument. But yes, some things start faster than others. And again, it really depends on how far you are. Like if you deploy once an hour on average, or you deploy once a day, or once a week, or once a month, makes a difference. So if it takes a full minute for my application to start, and I'm being very generous because I know many cases where a minute is extremely fast and it takes much more than that. But let's say a full minute. Does that really matter if you're deploying once a month?
No.
Probably doesn't. No. But if you're deploying many times a day, it does matter. It matters a lot, right? Because really, it all depends from the perspective. Or let's say if I turn around and change from how much it takes to initialize to, let's say, how much it takes to build. Now, if your tests are running for, let's say, 3 hours, whether it takes a few seconds or it takes full 10 minutes to build is irrelevant, right? Nobody's going to complain that building my application takes 10 minutes if it takes 3 hours to run tests. But if my tests are lightning fast and execute in a matter of minutes, then hey, my build process better be measured in seconds.
Absolutely.
It's really all relative. Whenever you're looking at optimization, you want to see what can bring the most advantage by tackling, right? So you want to go for the slowest one in the herd. And in that cases, minutes might be completely irrelevant.
And one other one that you jumped over is the actual size of the image itself. If your image size is, call it 100 meg in Go versus, let's call it 2 gig Java with a full image, a full OS image.
Yep.
That's going to be a big deal. The speed may not be that big of a deal. You might be able to spin them both up at the same amount, but your disk that it's having to read from, to hydrate the container from, that's going to matter.
Not only that, but the time it requires to pull gigs from a registry is not the same as the time to pull megabytes from registry. The cost from moving things across the traffic is also relevant, and so on and so forth. So all those, that's also a problem that we have when we are separated into departments or silos, is that when you see one thing in isolation, you say, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal if it takes 15 seconds for my application only to initialize. It's not a big deal if it takes 10 seconds to pull my image. But when you sum all those things, when you think of them on a level of the system, and performance of the system, and speed of the system, reliability of the system, cost for running that system, then those things tend to multiply exponentially very, very fast.
Right.
I've been involved, and you probably as well, where suddenly a company starts asking questions like, hey, why do we pay hundreds of thousands only for storage a month? And
Storage, yeah.
only storage. And I know cases where actually they would be happy if it's hundreds of thousands. And there is no, and in most cases, there is no single answer. Say, hey, this is why you're paying 100K for storage. No, it's a combination of many different things that looked in its isolation seem irrelevant.
Hundreds of thousands for storage. And then if you didn't pick the right storage and you're having to pay egress for every time a pull happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And again, when I said example of storage, even that was looked at isolation because yes, it's network bandwidth of transferring things from one place to another as well. It's cause of that.
Thus, the reason why those two things are probably a factor in why less than 5% of all global IT spend is to cloud. Right? That would add up. I mean, people have probably done POCs and they realize, wait, I could just go buy some hardware, stick it in the data center, pay for the power, pay for the people, and still come out ahead.
Exactly. Cloud, almost kind of, the cost of running in cloud is almost forcing us to do things better, right? Kind of, if I actually cannot do things in a certain way and I should do them, then cloud becomes too expensive and I should stay in on-prem. Or the other way around, hey, for me to go to cloud, I actually do need to fix those things.
That's where the lift and shift to the cloud is a very bad idea for most people. I mean, if the application was already optimized, then it may be a no-op. But most enterprises have not had optimized applications ever.
My first reaction to lift and shift is always that's a bad thing. But that's mostly because how I see it in practice. Because for many companies, lift and shift is, lift and shift and then I'm done. And that falls into this is bad type of example. Now, if you are serious about improving your stuff, then lift and shift is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing because you might want to lift things, shift into cloud, and then fix them while you're there instead of fixing them before you get there. To me, that makes perfect sense. It's just that in practice, it's not lift and shift and improve. It's lift and shift, I'm done. And that's why lift and shift is bad.
And will always be bad, at least from that. It's lift and shift isn't bad. It's the and done that is bad.
It's a typical project management type of stuff. Yes, we're going to also redesign it or re-architecture it or refactor it. But let's do the project number one, which is lift and shift. And I promise we're going to get to the other parts later. When you hear that, run away.
Run away. I was going to try to. I lost my thing. Yeah, that's a bad idea. Let's talk about one more thing. Which one do you want to talk about? I picked the others. Which one do you want to talk about?
I don't know any. I don't know. I already talked about all of them. Really.
Let's talk about packaging. Actually, no. Let's talk about shell. Let's talk about shell because that's a fun. That one can cause. We're talking about gray hairs versus the less than 20-year-olds. This is where the fight begins.
It begins, and to me, I didn't call it out in that video, but the choice of the terminal you might use might, and I'm not saying always will, but might be a reflection of how you see the world today, in a way, right? If I'm primarily into operations and I don't write code, then hey, picking a terminal, whichever terminal you want, makes a lot of sense. But if you acknowledge that you need to do both, you need to write code and you need to execute something from a terminal, right? I think that's minority of us still, but that's where we should be. And in that case, terminal should be part of your IDE, integrated development environment, right? So you have your environment setup, right? And this is where you select files. This is where you write code, and this is where you run terminal. To me, those three components need to be on my screen at all times. Now, can you run an IDE and a terminal, separate terminal? Yes, you can, in a different monitor or part of your screen, absolutely. But to me, it makes perfect sense that terminal is part of IDE.
Okay. I'm not going to argue that point. I think that's a reasonable conclusion.
No, I had moments in my career where I was more on the ops side than dev side. Those were brief, but hey, in those cases, I was running just terminal, kind of no IDE. And VI was my editor of choice for a long time.
Right.
But since that is now mixed, I cannot justify working with VI, for example, if I'm writing code for real. If I'm not just modifying some files on a server.
Right. Jump in, make a quick change, back out.
Yeah, I mean
you don't need an IDE for that.
And then that's where VI shines. But I'm trying to get away from jumping into any server. So all the files are on my laptop. I'm not modifying anything on a server. And then the question is, hey, if all the files are on your laptop and you are spending a lot of time both by running commands and by writing code, then IDE sounds like a better choice than editor plus terminal.
I was going to take you somewhere else, but I'm not going to do it right now. The only thing I will say, because we've talked about this before, and we can wrap up with this, is we were talking about the possibilities of not needing a real laptop anymore to do our jobs. This is the Git pod or a Visual Studio Workspaces. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Something.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's right. They're changing it to GitHub. Is that ever going to be a reality? Do you think it's possible?
I think it's definitely possible. I mean, it will be a reality. Now, but I think it's reality already today. Now, what I just said might be true if by reality means, yeah, you can do that and you have benefits from doing that. Now, if by reality you mean significant percentage of people are doing that, then we're still far from that. I mean, far, like maybe a year or two away, or maybe more, right? Away from being able to say, hey, there is a significant percentage of people using IDE and doing everything in cloud or remote.
I will bring back one of the things that Brett said yesterday. He was talking about the move from Intel-based architectures to ARM-based architectures and the pricing differences you get and the performance differences that you get. And I think this goes along with that. If I've got a good enough, quote unquote, laptop, tablet, whatever I need, and all of my compute is remote. Doesn't mean in the cloud, but it's remote from that device. And it acts as if it's on my device. In other words, I'm using Gitpod, I've got my own namespace in Kubernetes or whatever my compute environment is, doesn't have to be Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Then the company issued laptop becomes a Chromebook.
Correct. Exactly. I mean, we've seen that with other types of things. Like, I remember I rejected the idea not to have all my music stored on a disk drive or a CD. That idea was unimaginable for me. And hey, now I play all my music on Google Music or YouTube Music or whatever it's called, right? And then I was being against of doing the same thing with movies. So I had music in cloud of sorts, and then but all my movies were stored somewhere on a disk drive or wherever, right? And I'm not doing that anymore, and so on and so forth. It's very clear that we are moving to cloud. It's just that maybe how do you call that? Non-professional usages are more adopted now than professional.
Right. Because it gets down to the availability of broadband to the end user.
Yeah.
Back when you could only get an ADSL line, you didn't have much bandwidth to do anything.
Exactly. And I remember the same thing, for example, with email. When Gmail started, it was kind of like, look, this is ridiculous. You cannot tell me that this is as good as Outlook. I was using Outlook at that time. And it was not so good. It was not even close. But today, I'm not having Outlook. I don't think that there are many people who do. And when I say Outlook, I mean Outlook running on your desktop, not Outlook from Office 365.
Right. I mean, other than, because I was actually going through this the other day, what applications am I running locally on a day-to-day basis? Like what's actually running on my machine? I have a browser. Okay. I'm using Slack, but I could use Slack in the browser. I have a couple of other smaller, basically Electron-based apps that could be in a browser. And I only have a very small handful of native applications, very small.
Exactly.
So I'm probably 3 applications away from being able to go completely remote.
I mean, we're recording this. I remember when we were starting with the stream, we were discussing whether to use Ecamm or this or that. And Ecamm is probably better than StreamYard, but it's not more convenient. And eventually StreamYard will become as good as Ecamm, and then it will be both as good and convenient. And in some later date, it will be better than Ecamm, potentially, right? Because more users, meaning more investment into it and all that stuff. So it goes from that convenient first, but worse. Convenient, but equally good. Convenient, but better.
Right. That's one of the core tenets behind StreamYard, and not that we're doing a StreamYard pitch here, but one of their core tenets is simplicity. And
exactly.
If I had to lug around, now I do have Ecamm. I actually am not using it right now because my hardware won't handle it. That's the one reason why, because I've got such underpowered hardware. But number 2, if I did have it running, it would probably be running on a more beefier, it could be an iMac or even a Mac Mini. But that means I couldn't just go anywhere. Versus with StreamYard, I can go anywhere and do this. And
here's a hypothetical question for you. Imagine that all you're doing is streaming like this. Imagine that that's your only job. It's not, I know, but imagine for the sake of argument, right? Yep. And now you have you just said it kind of like, not a good machine over there, right?
Yeah.
Would you buy a new one? If it's only for streaming live.
Oh, only for streaming?
Yeah. Would the benefit of using Ecamm justify buying a new machine compared to potential downsides of StreamYard?
For streaming only, the answer is no, I would not do it. The only reason I would purchase a piece of hardware would be for streaming and probably editing. Editing is really where I'm feeling the pain right now. But there's even cloud services for that. I'm just not willing to pay for them right now.
Yeah, and they're on different level of quality. That's why I wanted to isolate if it's only streaming. Now there are many things, and what I'm really trying to say is that if the number of things that kept you on your beefy laptop was, let's say, 100 imaginary number, today is 75, and tomorrow it will be. The number of the reasons for you to do something local is dropping over time.
Right, like. We use Canva for our YouTube thumbnails and the podcast thumbnails. They just got, by the way, I don't know if we talked about that before, they just got like a $75 million round recently. So they're not going anywhere, right? They're in it for the long haul. Could we do things better in Photoshop? Probably. There's certain things that would be better, like pixel perfect positioning in
It wouldn't be
Canva
better.
doesn't exist. Well, if I got pixel
For
perfect,
us, it wouldn't be better. For a
wouldn't be.
professional who knows what he's doing, yes. I can
Correct.
guarantee you that I would make worse thumbnails. Not that I'm making good thumbnails, but there would be worse and more effort in Photoshop.
Yeah.
I can guarantee
So
you
it's,
that.
and again, Canva is a simplicity first play, I believe. I haven't heard them say that, but it's definitely simplistic. My wife uses it all the time. So, and she's not a graphic designer by any stretch of the imagination. However, our daughter is a graphic designer, and she has a subscription to the full suite of Adobe because she does lots of
sense.
stuff all the time. So, at some
Then
point,
I'm willing to make a bet that your daughter, probably now is not the moment, but a couple of years from now, she will come back and tell you that she switched to Adobe Online.
probably. At some point. By the way, the new iMacs, the M1 iMacs, she's waiting for that. She can't decide which color she wants. Wow, we're already at the hour. How did we do that?
Yeah.
All right, so if you haven't joined us up in the Slack workspace yet, that's scrolling right along the bottom. You can click on that link, join up the workspace. Join up. Do we have people automatically pushed into any channels? I can't remember if they automatically get subscribed to a channel or not when they join.
In Slack?
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay.
Most likely. I have no idea.
I don't remember. And then our Twitter handles are scrolling by down there too if you've not hung out with us before. For everybody that's been here with us live today, thanks for hanging out with us live. If you've watched the replay, thanks for watching the replay. If you're here with us live, though, before you split, go ahead and give us a thumbs up on the video before you leave. We'll see if we can get another 5 people to watch in the next hour. That would be cool. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and click on the subscribe button, ring the bell, do the things. And if you haven't bought the books and courses yet, go do that. The links for those. Do I put those in the YouTube? I bet I don't. I know I put them in the podcast, but I don't know that I ever put a link off to the. I need to do that.
I think, and I'm not sure that there is a link in the videos of the other channel.
Yeah,
you can just copy and paste from there.
Yeah, let's see. Do you do that? Here, I'll look at it. Yep, you got it there.
Oh, and it's nice and pretty.
Yours is nice and pretty. I need to steal that. So that's what I'll be doing this weekend, I guess. So let me get the banners turned off here before we go. And let's see here. Klaus, thanks. You have a great weekend as well. We should be back probably the same time again next week. I know it's sort of early for our EU people compared to where we've been, and it's also early for our Pacific people. But jobs. That's what we'll say. All right. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us live today or watching the replay. And we will talk to you again next week.